The wrench slipped from Heinrich's hand and clattered onto the muddy ground beneath the truck. He didn't pick it up. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on something that made his stomach turn, not from fear, but from understanding. A terrible, crushing understanding that changed everything he thought he knew about this war. It was October 1944, somewhere in the rain-soaked fields of Belgium, where morning fog still clung to the hedgerows like smoke from yesterday's artillery barrage. 3 German mechanics had been sent to inspect a captured American vehicle. Routine work, nothing special. Just another abandoned truck left behind during a skirmish that barely rated a mention in the daily reports. But this wasn't just another truck. Heinrich Mueller, 34 years old, a master mechanic from Stuttgart who could diagnose an engine problem by sound alone, stood frozen beside an olive-drab GMC CCKW 2.5-ton cargo truck. Beside him, Klaus Zimmer, younger, barely 22, still thought of vehicles the way they taught him in technical school, as puzzles to be solved by skilled hands. And there was Otto Friedrichs, the oldest at 41, who had worked at the Opel factory before the war and knew every bolt, every tolerance, every carefully machined component of Germany's military trucks. None of them were prepared for what they were about to discover. "Pass me the toolbox," Heinrich said, his voice flat, mechanical. Klaus retrieved it from their Kubel wagon and set it down with a metallic thud. The box itself was a work of German precision, organized compartments, tools arranged by size and function, each piece crafted for specific tasks. Otto circled the American truck slowly, like a surgeon examining a patient. "Look at it," he muttered. "It's so plain, like something you'd see hauling potatoes on a farm." He wasn't wrong. The GMC had none of the refinement German vehicles possessed. No elegant lines, no sophisticated engineering details visible from the outside. Just flat panels, riveted together with industrial indifference. Canvas stretched over a simple frame. Tires that looked heavy and crude. Klaus tried the driver's door. It opened with a hollow clang that echoed in the morning air. "Cheap," he said almost dismissively. "Stamped steel. No finesse." But Heinrich wasn't listening. He had already popped the hood, and what he saw underneath stopped his breath. The engine bay was organized, not in the German sense, where components nested together in precisely calculated spaces, where every wire followed the shortest engineered path, where beauty and function merged in mechanical poetry. No, this was different. Everything was accessible. The spark plugs sat on top of the engine block, right where you could reach them, not buried beneath manifolds or hidden behind brackets. Just there, obvious, waiting. The air filter, 1 thumb screw. The distributor, 3 bolts, no special tools required. The carburetor sat on the side, held by simple fasteners that a child could identify. "This is not engineering," Otto said, moving beside Heinrich to peer into the engine bay. I don't know what this is." Heinrich picked up his wrench, the standard one from their kit. He placed it on the first bolt he saw. Perfect fit. He tried another bolt deeper in the engine. Same fit. A third bolt on the opposite side. Same. His hand began to tremble. "What is it?" Klaus asked, sensing something in Heinrich's silence. "Count the bolt sizes," Heinrich whispered. Otto started pointing, checking, measuring mentally. After 30 seconds, he stopped. His face had gone pale. 6, maybe 7 different sizes for the entire engine assembly. Klaus shrugged. So, Heinrich said, his voice hollow. "The Opel Blitz has over 40 different bolt sizes. 40. Each one requiring a specific tool, a specific torque setting, a specific." He couldn't finish. Otto completed the thought. "A specific level of expertise that we no longer have." The silence that followed was broken only by distant artillery, German guns, retreating eastward, firing at ghosts. Klaus still didn't understand. But surely precision is better? Surely tight tolerances, exact specifications. "Precision," Heinrich interrupted, "requires precision to maintain." He stepped back from the truck, looking at it now with new eyes. "This truck doesn't require precision. It requires nothing. It just works." He walked around to the rear suspension and knelt in the mud. The leaf springs were massive, crude, Ugly things, layers of curved metal stacked like the world's simplest mechanical solution. They looked primitive compared to the sophisticated torsion bar suspension on German vehicles. But Heinrich knew something Klaus didn't. He'd spent the last 6 months watching Opel Blitz trucks break down because their torsion bars bent under stress and required factory-level equipment to realign. Equipment that no longer existed because the factories were being bombed into rubble. These leaf springs, you could fix them with a hammer and a tree stump. Check the fuel lines, Otto said, his voice strange now, distant. Klaus followed the thick rubber hoses with his finger. They're held with simple clamps. Just screwdriver clamps. Nothing special. Exactly, Otto breathed. Nothing special. Everything about this truck is nothing special. He looked at Heinrich. That's the point, isn't it? Heinrich nodded slowly. They didn't design this for mechanics. They designed it for soldiers. Any soldier. Every soldier. The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Klaus finally began to understand. You mean? I mean, Heinrich said, standing up and wiping mud from his hands, that any American private with 2 weeks of basic training can keep this truck running. While we... He gestured back toward their lines, where vehicles sat broken, waiting for parts that would never come, for specialists who were already dead. We built trucks for experts. In 1939, that made sense. In 1944, all our experts are gone. Otto moved aside of the truck bed and found something that made him freeze. Stenciled into the frame, barely visible under layers of road dirt, was a production stamp. He wiped it clean with his sleeve. Pontiac Motor Division, Unit 187,492, Batch 3, September 1944. Klaus read it over his shoulder. Unit 187,000? 492, Otto corrected, his voice dead. That's not a serial number. That's a count. This is the 187,492nd truck of this model that Pontiac produced. That's impossible, Klaus said. One factory couldn't. One American factory, Heinrich interrupted, produced more trucks in 1 year than all of German industry produced in the entire war. The number sat between them like a gravestone. Otto pulled out a cigarette with shaking hands. Do you know how many Opel Blitz trucks we manufactured last year? With all our factories, all our craftsmen, all our precision? Neither answered. 27,000. Across all production facilities. He lit the cigarette, took a drag, and exhaled slowly. The Americans built 20 times that number of just this one model. In the same year, they were also building tanks, aircraft, ships, bombs, rifles. His voice trailed off. Klaus sat down heavily on the truck's running board. How do you fight that? You don't, Heinrich said simply. He walked in front of the truck and stared at the simple, flat grill. Behind it sat an engine that required no specialist knowledge, bolts that any wrench could turn, parts that could be swapped without calibration, a design that assumed abuse and demanded nothing in return. We spent a decade building the finest tactical army in the world, Heinrich said quietly. Brilliant officers, elite soldiers, precision equipment, perfect execution. He placed his hand on the cold metal hood. But we never built this. We never built the thing that makes an army immortal. What thing? Klaus asked. Logistics that cannot die. Heinrich's voice was bitter now. Logistics simple enough that incompetence can't kill it. Logistics so abundant that loss becomes meaningless. Logistics that replace faster than the enemy can destroy. Otto finished his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. We built masterpieces. They built a system. And the system, Heinrich said, closing the hood gently, almost respectfully, always wins. The 3 mechanics reported their findings to Hauptmann Dieter Vogel, the division supply officer, a man who had spent 20 years in industrial management before the war. He listened to their assessment in silence, his face growing more drawn with each detail. When they finished, he sat for a long moment, then pulled out a folded map covered in pencil marks, calculations, fuel consumption rates, replacement timelines. I've been tracking this, he said quietly, for months. Every captured American vehicle tells the same story, and it's worse than you think. He spread the map on the hood of their Kubel wagon. In September alone, American forces in France moved 800,000 tons of supplies from the coast to the front lines. 800,000 tons. Do you know how much we moved to our forward units in the same period? The mechanics waited. 72,000 tons. Less than 1/10. He pointed to notations on the map. And we did it with horses. Thousands upon thousands of horses. Each one needing food, water, rest, veterinary care. Each one vulnerable to weather, terrain, exhaustion. The Americans? Klaus asked. Trucks. Just trucks. Tens of thousands of trucks that don't need rest, don't need veterinarians, don't stop for weather, don't panic under artillery fire. Vogel's fingered tray supply routes on the map. They can move an entire army's worth of supplies in the time it takes us to move a single division's rations. Heinrich stared at the numbers. That's why Normandy failed. Normandy failed, Vogel corrected, because we're fighting World War I logistics against World War II industry. And industry always wins. Otto spoke up. What about our new production plans? The modernization programs? Vogel laughed, a harsh, broken sound. We don't have factories anymore. We have craters where factories used to be. And even if we had them, even if we could retool every remaining plant, we couldn't match American output in 10 years. He folded the map. They're not just ahead of us. They're playing a different game entirely. So what do we do? Klaus asked. Vogel looked at each of them in turn. We keep fighting, because that's what soldiers do. But we stop lying to ourselves about why we're losing. He pointed at the captured GMC. That truck right there? It's worth more to Germany's war effort than any Tiger tank we've ever built, because we can use it. We can maintain it. We can keep it running with minimal expertise and zero factory support. His voice dropped. That should terrify you, because it means the Americans solved the one problem we never even tried to solve, how to wage industrial war at global scale. The words settled over them like ash. 3 weeks later, they saw the convoy. It was early November, during a brief lull in the retreat. The 276th Infantry Division had taken defensive positions near a crossroads, waiting for fuel that would probably never arrive. Their vehicles had scattered along the roadside. Opel Blitz trucks with cracked torsion bars, Kubel wagons with seized engines, horse-drawn wagons covered in mud. Then, through the morning mist, they heard it, not the irregular sputtering of German vehicles, not the clip-clop of hooves, but a deep, rhythmic rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Heinrich climbed onto the roof of a farmhouse to get a better view and felt his heart sink. An American supply convoy stretched across the horizon. Not a column, not a tactical movement, but an unending river of identical vehicles. GMC trucks, Dodge weapons carriers, International harvesters, all moving at the same speed, same spacing, same mechanical certainty. He counted them. 50, 75, 100. He stopped counting at 150 because more kept appearing through the mist, and his mind couldn't process the scale. Klaus joined him on the roof. Mein Gott. Not God, Heinrich said. Detroit. That's what divinity looks like when it's manufactured. Each truck carried supplies, ammunition, fuel, rations, medical equipment, replacement parts. The convoy didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't pause for weather or terrain. It simply flowed forward with the inevitability of water finding its level. Otto, watching from below, felt something break inside him. We can't win, he said to no one in particular. We were never going to win. Because in that moment, watching that endless line of identical trucks, he understood what their officers refused to see. Germany had built an army for battles. America had built an army for war. And war, real war, industrial war, total war, that wasn't decided by tactical brilliance or superior training or even better weapons. It was decided by the simple, brutal mathematics of who could sustain momentum longer. And momentum, Otto realized, looked like this. 10,000 trucks that all use the same parts, require the same basic maintenance, and could be replaced faster than the enemy could destroy them. December came, and with it, Hitler's final gamble, the Ardennes offensive. The order filtered down through desperate channels. All available units would launch a massive winter attack, split the Allied lines, capture fuel depots, and turn the tide through shock and speed. The mechanics received their assignment with dark irony. They were to maintain captured American vehicles for use in the offensive, because Germany's own trucks couldn't handle the winter conditions or the fuel shortages. Klaus couldn't help but laugh when he read the order. So we're going to attack America, using American trucks? Not attack. Heinrich corrected quietly. Beg. We're begging their own vehicles to save us from what their vehicles have already done. The offensive began on December 16th. For the first 2 days, it looked like it might work. German armor punched through thin American lines, pushing deep into Belgian territory. Reports came back of captured fuel, scattered defenders, breakthrough momentum. But Heinrich, Otto, and Klaus, working in a field depot 30 kilometers behind the spearhead, saw different reports. The ones that didn't make it into official communications. Panzer Division stalled not from enemy resistance, but from empty fuel tanks. Supply trucks broke down in winter cold because their sophisticated components couldn't handle the stress. Horse-drawn columns froze in place when temperatures dropped below -15 Celsius. Entire battalions sat immobilized, waiting for fuel that never arrived because the trucks carrying it had quit working 50 kilometers back. Meanwhile, every captured GMC kept running. They started in the cold. They tolerated low-grade fuel scraped from abandoned depots. Their batteries held charge. Their engines turned over without coaxing. They were crude, ugly, simple, and they didn't care about the cold, the mud, or the inexperienced drivers behind their wheels. On the 5th day, Heinrich and Otto were sent forward to recover a stranded vehicle. What they found wasn't a broken truck. It was a monument to everything Germany had built wrong. A King Tiger tank, 70 tons of most sophisticated armor in the world, a masterpiece of German engineering, sat abandoned on the side of Forest Road. Not destroyed, not disabled, just out of fuel. Someone had scratched a message on the turret. Keen Treibstoff, no fuel. Otto placed his hand on the cold steel. This tank costs, what? Millions of Reichsmarks? Thousands of man-hours? Rare materials we can't replace. Heinrich looked back at their captured GMC, engine idling quietly, waiting patiently to carry them back to base. That truck cost the Americans probably less than they spent on a pilot's training, and it's the one still moving. The message was clear, brutal, undeniable. You can build the finest weapon in the world, but if you can't keep fuel flowing to it, you've built an expensive monument to failure. By Christmas, the offensive had collapsed, not from enemy counterattacks, though those came, not from tactical errors, though there were many, but from the same problem that had been killing Germany since 1943. Logistics that required expertise Germany no longer possessed, replacement parts Germany could no longer produce, and fuel Germany had never had enough of. The GMC trucks, stolen, repaired with salvage parts, maintained by exhausted mechanics, they outlasted everything, because they were designed to outlast everything. The war ended for Heinrich, Otto, and Klaus on a muddy road in March 1945. American infantry swept through their position with overwhelming force, and resistance crumbled within hours. They surrendered without drama, hands raised, weapons abandoned. The war, at least the part fought with guns, was over, but the education continued. They were processed, searched, and then, surprisingly, put to work, not as prisoners building fortifications or clearing rubble, but as mechanics. An American motor sergeant, broad-shouldered and pragmatic, looked at their hands, oil-stained, scarred, calloused, and said simply, "You know vehicles?" Heinrich nodded. "Good. We're short on hands. Follow me." They were led to a motor pool that made their heads spin. Rows upon rows of GMC trucks, Dodges, Studebakers, all lined up with geometric precision. Engines open, wheels off, parts spread across wooden tables. But what stunned them wasn't the quantity. It was the casualness. American soldiers, not trained mechanics, just regular soldiers, moved between vehicles with wrenches in hand, swapping carburetors, replacing starters, adjusting valves. Tasks that would have required specialist training in Germany were being performed by 19-year-olds who'd learned the job in a week. The motor sergeant noticed their expressions. Something wrong? No, Otto managed. It's just impressive. The sergeant laughed. This is nothing. You should see the depot in Antwerp. Miles of trucks. Miles. All standardized, all reparable by anyone. He pointed to a parts shelf stack floor to ceiling. Spark plugs fit every engine. Hoses work across all models. Filters are universal. We designed it so a dummy could fix it. Heinrich's voice was quiet. That was very wise. Necessary, the sergeant corrected. Can't win a war if your vehicles only work when mechanics are available. So we made mechanics unnecessary. Klaus, watching a young private install a fuel pump in under 10 minutes, finally asked a question that had haunted him for months. How many of these trucks did you build? The sergeant didn't hesitate. GMC alone? Over 500,000. Add in Dodge, International, Studebaker, Ford. He shrugged. Total? Several million. Several million. The number didn't feel real. It felt like a mistake, like someone had added too many zeros. But looking at the endless rows of identical vehicles, Heinrich knew it wasn't a mistake. It was strategy. That evening, as the sun set behind rows of olive-drab silhouettes, the sergeant handed each German a rag and leaned against a fender. You want to know the real secret? He asked. They waited. We didn't win because we built better stuff. We won because we built more stuff that was good enough. And good enough, multiplied by 1,000,000, beats perfect every single time. Heinrich cleaned his hands slowly, absorbing the words. Your trucks are not masterpieces. Nope. They lack sophistication. Yep. But they don't need to be perfect. The sergeant smiled. Now you're getting it. 1,000 okay trucks beats 100 perfect trucks. Because when you lose 100, you notice. When we lose 100, he gestured at the motor pool. We send 200 more. Otto sat down heavily on a tire. We never understood that. No, the sergeant agreed. You didn't. You built quality. We built quantity. And quantity in a war this big is its own kind of quality. Months passed. Heinrich, Otto, and Klaus were eventually repatriated to Germany, or what was left of it. The cities they returned to were hollow shells. Factories reduced to rubble. Rail lines severed. Bridges collapsed. The precision industrial culture they'd once worshipped now limped through ruins. But everywhere, on every road, at every depot, in every reconstruction site, American trucks kept moving. GMCs hauled lumber for rebuilding homes. Dodges carried food to displaced families. Studebakers transported medical supplies to shattered towns. The very vehicles that had exposed Germany's weakness were now the foundation of its recovery. Heinrich found work at a reconstruction depot in Stuttgart, training young Germans who'd never held a wrench. They learned quickly because the trucks they worked on were designed to be understood at a glance. One day, a teenager asked him, "Why is everything on these American trucks so simple?" Heinrich paused, remembering that October morning in Belgium when he'd first opened the hood of a GMC and seen the future. Because, he said slowly, the Americans designed for the world as it is, not the world as they wish it to be. The teenager frowned. I don't understand. You will. Heinrich placed a hand on the truck's fender. They knew that in war, nothing goes according to plan. So they built vehicles that didn't need plans. They built for chaos, for incompetence, for worst-case scenarios. And because they did, their truck survived everything. And ours, Heinrich's voice was quiet. Ours needed perfection. And in war, perfection doesn't exist. Years later, when German industry rebuilt itself, the lessons of that captured truck echoed through every factory floor. Standardization, interchangeability, simplicity, scalability, maintenance as part of the weapon. Companies like Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, they didn't abandon German craftsmanship, but they combined it with something new. The American understanding that scale matters, that simplicity survives, that a design which forgives mistakes outlasts a design which requires mastery. The GMC CCKW never became famous. It never got monuments or museums. It never captured imaginations the way Tigers and Shermans and P-51s did. But it won the war, not through firepower or armor or speed, but through something far more devastating. It made logistics unstoppable. And in industrial warfare, unstoppable logistics means unstoppable armies. Heinrich understood this on that muddy October morning in Belgium, when he dropped his wrench and realized the war was already lost. Not because of any battle, not because of any weapon, but because 3 German mechanics had discovered that their enemy had solved a problem Germany never even tried to solve: how to wage war to scale where individual brilliance became irrelevant. "We built perfect machines," Heinrich would later tell an interviewer for a trade journal. "They built machines that made perfection irrelevant." He paused, looking out the window at the rebuilt factory floor, where assembly lines hummed with post-war productivity, a productivity that had learned hard lessons from American methods. "That," he said quietly, "is why we lost." And somewhere in a scrapyard outside Paris, a GMC truck sat rusting, its engine long silent, its frame slowly returning to the earth. It had never been beautiful. It had never been celebrated. But for 5 years it had been immortal. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.